I've lost count now about how many years Lippitt House Museum and the League of Women Voters have collaborated on community conversations, but it has been over a decade, and we are delighted to be hosting this series on building a caring community, building a caring future this year. On your seats, you will find a handout with biographies of the presenters tonight and information about their organizations and our organization. So wanted you all to have that. And if you need to use the restroom, there is one out in the hallway. There's a WC. And the program tonight will be an hour, and we will ask our presenters to speak. And then we will open it up to questions. What I'd like to do is first just ask Holly Courage to tell you a little about the League of Women Voters, and then I will set some context for why we're here, and then I will pass it over to our presenters.
Okay, well, welcome. I'm happy that for a change, our league meeting was not canceled or postponed by snow. I'm very happy to welcome you all here. The League of Women Voters, as you may know, was an offshoot of the National National American Women's Suffrage Association. That's a real mouthful, but as suffragists, well, if any of you saw suffragists were not a necessarily united group of people. We fought all the time, and the result was that huge name, the National American Women's Suffrage. So in any event, once the suffrage bill was passed, the people of the League thought, we have to form a League of Women Voters to help people be informed about women, to be informed about voting. And so that has been our mission, helping people understand issues. And it's, you know, when you really get back to it, the suffrage movement itself was not strictly about getting the vote. It was women caring about issues. The women's sphere really did kind of cover welfare and everything, you know, child labor, schooling, you name it, temperance, you name it. And the reason everybody got together on suffrage, because if we didn't get together and have a vote, we couldn't influence what happened, what our government did. So that's why we're here, and hopefully you will feel well informed by this evening.
Thank you, Holly. I realized I forgot to introduce myself. I am Kathy Saunders, the director of Lippitt House Museum. Lippitt House's mission is to help contribute to a civil society by being a place where community, art, and history converge. And one of our main interpretation themes is in fact around immigration, because the family who built this house moved in here in 1865, and between 1865 and 1900, Providence's population tripled because of the number of immigrants who are coming here for jobs. And because of the booming economy. And so immigration then becomes one of our key interpretation themes, and that influences programs like this, as well as our outreach program, the civics education program we do with English language learners. We also have many other programs, and we hope you'll see you back for the rest of the year, but those themes are what made our team and the League of Women Voters team invite this wonderful, esteemed group of panelists. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Omar to be our facilitator for tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathy. My name is Omar. I'm the founder of the Refugee Dream Center and a former refugee myself. So this is great, quite exciting. I like what you stated. I'm going to start with that people who came before in Rhode Island were mostly immigrants, but from where? From mostly Ireland, and Italy, probably, and where? French Canada. Oh. So my point is they were white immigrants, right? But now the narrative is beginning to shift, and the notion of immigrant is a code word for non-white. So I think this conversation is going to be very important because then we can dissect, we can explore immigration from a different perspective for people to see people as humans rather than others who, how they are being framed in the media or by Washington out there. But before going forward, I'm going to introduce give chance to the team to introduce themselves. And I'll start with Weayonnoh in the middle with Sanvi. Yeah. So, thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. How are you?
Good.
My name is Weayonnoh Nelson-Davies. I'm the Executive Director of the Economic Progress Institute, and I'm joining Darius Divya, who is also part of the Economic Progress Institute. She's our Senior Policy Analyst for Children and Family, and also does a lot of work on access to public benefits, and just published an immigrant access to public benefits policy brief last year, dealing with what's happening with HR 1. I am an immigrant as well. I didn't come as a refugee. I came as escaping war at 16. My parents sort of got me out by myself, never left Liberia, where I'm from, and came to the US and came to Rhode Island at the age of 16. I've had several immigration statuses, and we'll talk about it. I was on humanitarian parole for a year because I entered with permission but no status. And then I was on temporary protected status, deferred, enforced, deportation status, and then legal permanent residence. And in 2013, became a U.S. citizen. So I'll stop there a little bit ago.
Jennifer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Wood, and I'm the director at the Rhode Island Center for Justice. I didn't bring any staff members to cheer for me tonight.
You should have.
But I'm really pleased to be here to talk about something that is both a timely issue and a forever issue. Because actually, the hostility towards immigration and immigrants and refugees in this country has been part of our history as long as there's been a history of the United States. And immigration policy, infamously, in terms of being codified by the federal government, starts with the decision to exclude basically whole categories of Asian immigrants. And so the very first thing we did as a nation wasn't to say, oh, how can we be more inclusive? How can we embrace the fact that many of that, what 2/3 of the people that came to this state between 1865 and 1900 were from other places? How can we really recognize and value that? No, it was like, why don't we cut out the Chinese and then shortly thereafter, Japanese people too? So I just want to really emphasize that what we are living in trying to depart from in creating the caring community is a long history of exclusion and oppression of immigrants. So, and before that, the transportation of enslaved people, and that's a whole other story that underlays part of how immigration policy has unfolded.
Well, thank you both. This is good. So I'm glad I'm with two amazing people that know the data. So we're gonna put those questions across. But I'm a little bit biased because I work with refugees mostly, and I'm curious to know a lot of numbers about the wider immigrant population. But uniquely for refugees in 2025 to 2026, since October to now, there are almost everybody is banned from coming to this country. So it's been almost a whole travel ban. For instance, 100,000 came to this country last year, and this year it's been 7,500 that has been approved. And only for Rhode Island numbers, only 39 have arrived so far. And basically that's like a blackout. And of that 39, 31 of them are South African Afrikaners. So, and I'll read this. According to the federal government, the SIVs were being allowed. SIVs are people who come from Afghanistan, mostly Iraq, people who work with US military and risk their lives. They've been banned because the federal government says for security reasons. So based on this, I'm working probably with asylees and immigrants in general. What are these shifts in demographics that you guys are seeing? What are the trends? What are you anticipating within your organizations?
I'll start a little bit with some numbers about Rhode Island. So currently, and these numbers are fresh because we're working on a report on the impact of deportation on Rhode Island, and impact of like not getting people to come in. So in Rhode Island, it's 160,000 immigrants from all walks of life and on different statuses. 45,000 of those are undocumented. 1 out of 5 business owners in Rhode Island is an immigrant. Those 45,000 undocumented immigrants we have contribute about $95 million in state and local taxes. We're talking about people who are our healthcare providers, who are our childcare providers, in hospitality, providing care to our seniors and people with disabilities. We're talking about neighbors. We're talking about people we call friends. Some people our children call families, right? That's who we're talking about when we talk about the immigrants that live in our community. So they've come to Rhode Island and they have contributed to Rhode Island, and they're part of, when we think of Rhode Island, they're a part of who they are. But immigrants are people, and I think when we talk about building a caring community, and we see people being excluded, not because of safety or crime, but because we are determining who is worth coming, I want you to think about those who are already here because they are worth being here, right? They are doing what makes Rhode Island great. Most immigrants come for different reasons, and we know this, right? Some people come escaping war, like me, escaping persecution. Some people come for better opportunities. Since the 1800s, people have been coming to the US for better opportunities. And some of the history Jen gave, when people be like, well, why can't you just become a US citizen? You're talking from 1996 to 2013 to be a US citizen, because that's not a straight path. But back then, when you landed on the US soil, the criteria then was prove you're white. If you're white, you're a citizen. So even there's a case about an Asian man who was like, but I am from the Caucasian race, I should be a US citizen. So when we talk about history of who we let in, it's choices we've made. We determine who is worthy, and we determine what the criteria will be. Is it just proof you're white, or is it you have to prove you're X, Y, and Z, you have to be here for 13 years and your family have to file for you, or you have to go this way and do this and do that just to become a legal permanent resident or citizen. So that is who we're talking about when we talk about immigrants. And that's what I will stop there, but I just want to set that tone about, especially in Rhode Island, who we are talking about. 160,000 people who are business owners, who are working, who are our neighbors, who are our friends, who are our family members.
So the question about these policy changes and how it is really having an impact, I want to answer that by answering how people are resisting some of the really radical policy changes that have been put in place over the last 18 months. You know, it seems particularly cruel to ensnare people in programs that say, we welcome you to come, because you have assisted us in foreign wars, or your family was displaced by our war in Southeast Asia a generation ago, and offer refugee status or other special statuses, only to snatch that away literally overnight, where certain whole categories of our neighbors thought, well, surely I must be safe because my entire family risked death to serve you, the United States government, in another place. And so your gratitude and loyalty would be presumed in an irrational universe. But where that becomes actually weaponized, and to say, well, you come from a conflict zone, therefore you're an unsafe person, therefore you're excluded, it seems really particularly cruel. Even more so than some of these broader characterizations of just, you're not from here, so no thank you. But what I really want to emphasize tonight is that these are not static realities. So everyone's heard about the ban on any visa consideration for folks from 39 listed countries. And I just want to share with you that yesterday or today, there was litigation filed to challenge that, to have nationwide effect, to say that actually it's completely illegal to simply ignore all of the existing, complex and bizarre though they are, and often unfair though they are, existing laws and regulations that govern immigration to the United States. You can't just say, oh, never mind, we're not doing that. And so I do want to point out that in federal courts since January of 2025, many decisions that the federal government has sought to impose in terms of some of these really radical policy departures and U-turns have been struck down, have been suspended, have been reversed. And then people, I say this too, I mean, my own children say to me, well, I guess you're not so clever now being a lawyer because nobody cares about the rule of law. So, gee, nice way to waste a life, Mom. I'm like, okay, take the knife out of my ribs. But the underlying point is a very serious one, which is that these actions are under challenge, and successfully so. So you hear about, oh, everyone's banned from 39 countries, and it sounds like, wow, that is a powerful action to take. But that's usually on page 1. It's on page 7 when a judge actually enters an injunction saying, actually, you're not allowed to do that. And then it's on page 20, 6 months later, when that injunction becomes permanent. And in terms of that resistance and that successful imposition of the rule of law as we know it and as it exists, then folks turn to me and say, yeah, but you know, the Supreme Court, like not our team, in terms of challenging those kinds of policies. But it is also important to understand that there are thousands of cases since January that have been filed in federal courts around the nation, challenging illegal actions taken by the federal government. Of those, a great majority are being upheld, the challenges. And of those rulings that restore the laws as we understood them before January 2025, a small fraction will be appealed to the appeals courts, less than 10% probably. And of those, there's usually somewhere between 25 and 50 cases a year that end up going to the Supreme Court. So there are thousands of successful challenges where whole groups of individuals are being protected, where their rights are being restored. And so is it a very scary time for people who are directly affected by the immigration system to be living? It is terrifying. But is there also a narrative that runs deeper than that, to say that there are people of goodwill? So, and I was thinking about, you know, building the caring community. As usual, we're kind of by definition preaching to the choir, because you guys all came out after some really crappy snowstorms on an evening to a place to listen to this, because I think you actually already care,
Yeah.
and you kind of want to know, what can I do about it? And we want to tell you that, for sure. But I also want you to know that there is much being done, and that you should not feel defeated or fatalistic about these policy changes, because every single policy I hear about, I wait, 100, 200, and there's the challenge. And then I wait a few more days and a few more weeks, and then I see, oh, okay, that's working. Or that one got rebuffed, but the one over here succeeded. So it really is a very fluid situation, and it is not just going in one direction.
Thank you so much. When you said 20% of businesses, about 5%?
Yeah.
20%?
One in 5
That's
businesses, so
20%.
20% of businesses. Yeah.
Somebody said, wow. So
Yeah.
I said, you did not hear mine, but but I did not know those numbers, so it's really, yes.
I just wanted to clarify that question. So you're saying, so of the, I think it was 160,000 immigrants, 1 in 5 are business owners?
No.
No.
Out of the 100,000 small businesses in Rhode Island, 1 in 5 are immigrants.
Thank you.
Yes.
And that's 5% of it. If my math is right.
Yeah, 20%.
But
20%
20%, okay.
And we're gonna have, they didn't bring any materials
We're gonna
that
share,
I'm gonna
okay,
talk, but yeah, eventually we'll share some of this.
But I think these kinds of conversations are important. This is why we need to have these conversations, because personally I did not know 1 in 5% of businesses in Rhode Island is owned by immigrants. And this is not second generation, it's immigrants.
Correct.
That's really important. So we'll come to questions after this. So why don't we just write our questions down and then we'll come back so that we can have
We're ready.
Yeah, but people are already energized, which is good. And thanks. Actually, the lawsuit Jen indicated, we are part of the Refugee Dream Center as part of the litigants. So we are hoping something good comes out of it. It's at national level confrontation with the administration. Let's see what comes out of it. But just taking it off of what we were just talking about, these policies. Right now, I'm thinking like at least 4 or 5 off of my head. Travel ban, 39 countries. The country I'm from, the Gambia, is part of it. I don't think it's full. I think it's partial ban for the Gambians. But I think about 19 of those countries are travel ban, full ban, and most of them is because of war happening back home. They say, oh, it's not for security reasons. They add them on the ban, or maybe they refuse to allow to receive deportees in those countries. Because imagine if you take a deportee from Guatemala and want to send them to Gambia or Ghana, the government rejects and becomes. So those are kinds of stuff. But hopefully that works. But there's also an asylum ban. That becomes even worse because these are individuals who are already here in the country asking for protection. Some are members of maybe activists back home, or ex-prisoners, torture survivors of war. Like Weayonnoh indicated, escape conflict and then come in here. Imagine you are told you have to go home. You cannot apply for asylum. So that's one of the problems that with these policies. And then there's a review of cases. So they said from 2021 to 2025, every refugee that arrived between that period, they're gonna open all the cases and review and find any small loophole to find a reason to send them back. And who do you think comes to mind is the Afghans, over almost 200,000 that came during that time. And these are people we messed up their country. We cannot just take ourselves out of it, but imagine they're already here, and then now we take ourselves out and want to send them back home. And that's one of the problems that's happening. So last week, we had a memo from the White House warning every refugee that if they do not apply for asylum after being here for 1 year, they'll be arrested and potentially deported. That's one of the memos that came recently. And then the benefits ban. They ban refugees, I think asylees, and probably almost all form of immigrant category from any form of benefit. Actually, the food stamp ban just started. Maybe you guys have more numbers numbers
I do.
about that.
Yeah.
So they banned food stamp. The 1st of March, now we have people coming to our food pantries. We don't even know what to make out of it yet.
Yeah,
No
Medicaid
food stamp.
is
Medicaid
next.
is coming, and all those benefits are coming. And it's not. This is not ending. Immigration is intertwined with all of us. Our country. The world is burning right now. Let's pray and hope things get better. Iran, Venezuela, everywhere, all over the world. So 117 million people displaced. It will be more than that. We're talking about probably 150. Iran is 93 million. Venezuela, Cuba. It's a mess out there. So only 42 million are registered by the UN. Just imagine, almost 80 million are displaced, stateless, undocumented, and out there without the help that they need from the humankind. So, where do we start?
Yeah, I want to go back to the SNAP and Medicaid for a couple of reasons to set context, because a lot of things happening is really connected. So how many heard about the one big beautiful bill? HR1.
Probably is an ugly bill.
Yeah, so let me share some context about that and how it connects to immigration. It's a tax policy, and a lot of the work we do at EPI is focused on tax policy for a specific reason. If you want to know who we want to target or who we care about, look at how we use our budget. So HR1 cut about $1 trillion from Medicaid. It cut about $150 billion, I think, from SNAP. Why? Right? People ask why. Was it because we were in debt and we needed to pay that? Let me give you some other numbers that maybe will shed light onto why. About $140 to $107 billion in HR1 was dedicated to immigration enforcement. For the border, for deportations, for ICE. So HR1, you hear people talking about it a lot. They don't understand that HR1 provided money, billions of dollars, to immigration enforcement. HR1 also gave $1 trillion to the wealthiest Americans or residents. And so we have this tax bill that cut Medicaid and SNAP to make sure they had enough money for immigration enforcement and enough money to make sure wealthy people were even more wealthy. But HR1 didn't just stop there. It cut Medicaid and SNAP and then decided, this is how we're going to cut it. We're going to target certain populations to make sure that they have no access and to punish states that will try to give them access. And so who were those targeted populations? In addition to some work requirements and expansion groups of people who got Medicaid, they went after immigrants. So asylees and the refugees and abused spouses and children of US citizens who have historically been eligible for SNAP and Medicaid are no longer eligible for those benefits under HR1. SNAP already started, Medicaid is set to start October 1st. So I want you to think about that when you think of policies. Deportations are happening because we have invested money in making sure they happen. And it's not just deportation for undocumented immigrants, it's deportation of the refugees, the asylees opening cases. There's even a movement now to open cases on naturalized citizens. So even naturalized citizens are no longer safe under this policy because we have so much money invested. So there's, I think 100 and 200 citizens a month they're gonna look at to see whether they can denaturalize them. They're going after legal permanent residents. So now legal permanent residents no longer have freedom of speech because they're looking at legal permanent residents who dare to protest what's happening, who have political say. Students who are in this country and in the world, students are the ones who are the conscience of a nation. Now students are under threats because they are also going to be investigated. And so HR1 was set to give money to spread the fear a lot of people have now. Fear of deportation, and not only when you're undocumented. If you're an immigrant, if you're black or brown. I'm naturalized. Last year, I started carrying my passport card. And I had this conversation with my 15-year-old who was born right here in Rhode Island. As soon as the Trump administration took over my kids' passport expired, I went and got them passports. And I told her, we were having a conversation because she always leaves her passport card. I'm like, you cannot leave your passport card because you have to prove you're a US citizen. And so this fear is a fear that we're all feeling. And when we talk about caring, it's not even immigrants of black and brown. We got 2 deaths in Minnesota of white people. And one of the things we do is like say something, speak up for each other, care for each other. And now there is fear being put, if you care, you might lose your life. That is what we're dealing with in 2026 in this country. So it's even beyond immigration. It's really tiring from my perspective. It's to make all of us fear. It's to make us not speak up against something that is unjust. It's to make us not understand where the investments are going with taxpayer dollars. And it's also to create a chilling effect. So HR1, by eliminating refugees and asylees and victims of domestic violence, even those immigrants who are still eligible for those benefits are not going to apply for them because they don't understand whether it's going to impact them. And you have some mixed households in the US, right? People have US citizen children who are eligible, but they're not going to apply for those US citizen children to have access because they're afraid or because they don't understand the very complicated rules around who in my household is eligible and how do you do that. So there's an intentional chilling effect, and we saw this again during the first Trump administration with the public charge rule, where they were saying if you get benefits, even if you're eligible, that may impact you applying to be a legal permanent resident. And a lot of people who are eligible stopped showing up for doctor appointments, stopped showing up for schools. And now you have ICE with a lot of money in their pocket terrorizing our communities. And so I'm sorry I'm the bearer of bad news, and I'm with Jen, there are cases being won. But I think it's important for us to understand what is happening. And most of the time, and I'm someone who have lived fighting for democracy, so I felt it in my gut that things were changing in the US in 2025. Because what is happening is you go after the least amongst you. Where it's like, well, I came here legally, so that is not about me, it's about undocumented. Then it's like, well, yeah, you're a refugee, but you should be in your own country. But well, you're a legal permanent resident, why didn't you file for your citizenship? And that is how democracy is lost. So we're talking about immigrants, we're talking about caring about people and humanity, but we're also talking about democracy that is now shifting and going, starting with immigrants. There's always a group of people that is starting with, and then it seeps. And so I want to share that message that we're talking about immigrants, we're talking about a policy, but it's a policy you study to understand how it's impacting all of us and impacting our communities and our future.
And building from that, I really think it's important to understand the breadth and depth of that assault. Because, as Weayonnoh already pointed out, there are categories of people in the United States where I never thought I would be having a conversation about, should I carry my card? So for example, legal permanent residence. In previous times, that was really tantamount to nearly naturalized, I would say, right? And many people stayed in that status for their entire adult life. And that was not considered really controversial. That was a category that after some periods of delay became eligible for all the usual benefits of being a person who's permanently in this country. So when they started to roust legal permanent residents at the border coming back in, my antenna went boing, because that was a big departure legally and culturally. And then to start to have a conversation about naturalized citizens. Okay, that is profound. I mean, unimaginable, really. And then to also drive it yet another layer deeper to talk about birthright citizenship. You know, baked into the Constitution. You know, that's just the depth of this campaign is, I have to say, impressive. And doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is to make everyone feel precarious. Because everyone knows someone whose citizenship is through the fact that they were born in this country, but their parents were not. Everyone has a cousin like that. Everyone has legal permanent resident friends, neighbors, cousins. Lots of people are themselves naturalized. So the people who would go to the ramparts and resist these policies and say, no, 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 I know better, I'm fighting back, I'd say, oh, maybe I shouldn't be so noisy. Because, you know, my cousin might get a problem even though they're a naturalized citizen. Or, well, they're kind of shooting white citizens for standing up for their immigrant neighbors. That's pretty scary and is really designed to get everyone to just shut up and sit down. I mean, and can be, frankly, highly effective. So I feel like a small voice going out week after week, going to hundreds of groups like yourselves, civically engaged people, directly affected immigrants, and giving the lawyer talk, right? And say, well, actually, a fact that many US citizens are unaware of, that all people physically present in the United States, regardless of status, are protected by basic constitutional rights, like the right to remain silent, Fifth Amendment, the right to be free from illegal search and seizure, the right to be free from arrest in your home without a judicial warrant. These rights that are fundamental. In fact, I used to joke, you know, my kids grew up watching Law and Order reruns, and we used to play the game in our home, like, who can name the Fourth Amendment violation first? Because it's like, it's just basic stuff that people take for granted. And to then learn months later that there was a memo issued in May internally inside ICE telling these kids who have been recruited off street corners, who have no training or expertise in immigration law or policy, or in constitutional rights, or in basic precepts and practices of policing. Oh yeah, you can go in anyone's house, just kick the door down. As long as you have a piece of paper from ICE, you don't need a judicial warrant, you're good, you're good. This has been baked into their training program. So if I'm an impressionable young person who got my signing bonus and went to see if I wanted to go and, you know, engage in a reign of terror on the streets of my community, and there's a lawyer who comes in the room and trains you and says, here's the rules. Fourth Amendment doesn't apply to immigrants, and you know, if you need to go in and try and find an immigrant, it doesn't apply to anyone, just kick the door down, go inside. We'll deal with the aftermath, that in the aftermath. This is very, very radical. I mean, these basic constitutional rights, a year ago, I would just go in a room and say, hey, here's the constitutional rights that apply to all people physically present in the United States. And I would often see surprised looks like, oh, I thought that was just for me because I'm a citizen. It's like, no, it's everyone. And then to now have to have the follow-on conversation, which is, however, when your constitutional rights are violated as a US citizen, as a naturalized citizen, as a green card holder, as an undocumented person, we're gonna have to go to court to vindicate that right. Because the only way to really protect rights is to correct the situation after they are violated. And that is a brutal truth that we are facing right now. And so I tell people this, and I say, those among us, and I'll use myself as an example, those among us who are in fact citizens who were born in this country, we have the highest layer of privilege to be protected by the Constitution and to stand in front of others who may be more precarious and say, you know, let me go to the grocery store for you, because if you get pulled over because you have a cracked taillight, that could be a life-altering experience. if I get pulled over because I have a cracked tail light, I'm probably gonna get a ticket. And so understanding what your position is in terms of how precarious or how secure your position is. I think in a funny way, we've all been subjected to a great leveling because we understand after Minnesota that even US citizens born in this country can end up dead if they stand up to these illegal actions. But they're also the best positioned, as those two humans did, to stand up. And so I think that's a very powerful thing, to take an inventory in yourself, to say, where do I stand on these issues? And what power do I have to resist these changes if I disagree with them?
Thank you so much. Thanks both of us. We're running a little bit out of time, but I think I'll have maybe one or two more questions to go. So, talking about ICE arrests, 220,000 people have been arrested by ICE so far. So just to create a perspective beyond the superficial things we see on TV or in the media, 220,000, and the numbers are going up. And as of January to now, 73,000. So probably that number is going to double by the end of this year. It's almost 700,000 deported out of the country, and most of them without due process anyway. And hundreds of thousands more self-deported themselves, or probably even more. And 38 people plus died in ICE custody. And one way or the other, you remember the famous one from the farm who fell, and no, it's been happening. The media is not reporting it that much. And 4 of them have been involved in fatal ICE shooting, and we know the truth from Minnesota. So these are the realities happening, and literally Americans or immigrants living as they're being trapped or hunted within their own country. And the worst part of it is that we see things in the media and think it's far away, but it may be happening right here at home. So there is a small Minnesota everywhere, and right here in Rhode Island, a client that I served from Mauritania was deported recently, I think about 1 or 2 months ago, Mamadou. And we tried our best. I drove down to Plymouth Detention Center a couple of times. I think it's about an hour drive to visit, but he was summarily deported without due process. He's back in Mauritania, and currently, with the reports I'm hearing, he's back in slavery, which is still being practiced in Mauritania. And we also heard about the story of the guy who was half blind, a Rohingya refugee in Buffalo, New York, when the CBP agents released him and put him in a place where he could not take himself home and died out of weather conditions. So this is heavy stuff. It's happening. The last time 2 Afghans ran into my office because they were being chased out by ICE from their workplaces at the restaurant. Luckily for me, I called it Rhode Island Deportation Coalition Network. Amazing people. They came and helped with the situation, and those people were never arrested. We literally barricaded our office, but other Afghans were arrested, at least 5 of them. So 2 that we know of, we were able to connect with Weayonnoh, and Weayonnoh, you probably know. So he was able to fight and pay. They paid about 3,000 bond fee, but they've been released, thank God. But this is the situation. I'm just trying to paint a picture that there's a mini Minnesota in every place, even without the cameras, right here happening here. What do you think? What do we hope this audience can take home from this conversation out of all this?
I know it's a lot of heavy stuff, but a couple of things. I think, to Jennifer's point, when we fight, we do win, right? There are court cases being won. The fact that people are protesting is a win. And that's important to recognize, even with the fear of what could happen, because if nobody shows up, then it will get worse. And so I think a couple of calls to action is continue to show up, right? It's hard to have courage. I just would, and sometimes I write and give when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to myself too. I'm like, remember courage when you wanna, show up. My 15-year-old with her passport card was like, during when the school students walk out, she's like, I'm walking out, Mom. And we went through all of that, and I was there to support her because I want her to understand that it is okay. And she has a mom who was showing up in the middle of a war where my mom was scared for me. And I wrote a piece about, would you open the door? Because I shared during the war, my parents, there were people running and being killed from a display cam and knocking on our doors, and they didn't open the door because the soldiers was right behind them. And I was 10 years old at that time, but I always remember that scenario vividly because I was crying, disappointed that we didn't open the door. And so since I've been in the social justice, attorney, advocate world, I go back to that. I always think about doors I must open, even if the risk is there, quite frankly, for me, because I've seen it. And I was like, I want it, If my children are there, maybe I may panic as a mom and say, my babies are in here. But I think, if you set your risk level, I need you all to think about what risk are you willing to take and what is worth it to you. To make sure you save other people, you care for your neighbor, and you care for the democracy so that we don't lose decades and centuries of where this country could be. So that, so that's like the broad thing, courage and fight. Like, please don't give up. Because that is, I always said, even from the beginning, 2022, I was never afraid of what Trump administration would do. I was afraid of people, the good people, not doing anything. That is my fear. And so my biggest call to action is, good people, please continue to do something. So part of this something is caring for your neighbors, shopping for them, standing up for them, standing and challenging these unjust laws in the ways you can. There's advocacy going on at our state house right now. One of it with the Immigrant Coalition is what is called the 364 bill. And what is that? 365 days is a year. A misdemeanor with a year puts you at risk of deportation. So this bill is saying change the misdemeanor law to 364 because that puts you under the year that sort of set things in motion for deportation. There are bills talking about ICE entering courthouses and safe spaces without that warrant and saying no, democracy requires that they have that warrant. Your voice, your testimony, joining in that is key for our state leaders to understand that Rhode Island have to do something to support our immigrants right here, despite what is happening in DC. And just keep the conversation going.
So, even more precisely about the 364-day bill, I really want people to get their heads around this. The risk of being deportable is not linked to the fact that you were found guilty of a crime and served 365 days, and now you could be found guilty and serve 364 days. No. If you, I looked it up, what the other misdemeanors are that can carry that 1 year sentence that will make you permanently deportable for life. Like, it's a life sentence. And the example everyone always uses is shoplifting. And everyone's like, oh, it's like Les Mis, you stole a loaf of bread and now you're going to be deported. But actually, it includes such offenses as trespassing. Trespassing, I don't know if any of you are following like the beach border wars in Rhode Island, but a lot of folks have taken trespassing charges because they believe that the coastline should be open and that is their form of First Amendment expression and their struggle that they're fighting to vindicate those rights. If you get a ticket for walking across the high water line and you're trespassing, and you plead to that because you're like, well, I'm not going to jail or anything, it's not criminal, I'm making a political statement right here. Because the crime is potentially punishable by 365 days. Not because you received that. You probably paid a minor fine and went home and thought, I did my bid for civics today. But another one is vandalism, including graffiti. So, you tagged offense, deportable for life. And by the way, you didn't go to jail, you didn't pay any hefty fine, you didn't understand, as a young person, that saying, oh yeah, I'll sign that paper and pay $100 fine would make you deportable. Because how would you know that? It's irrational, honestly, that could be the penalty for that one simple act. So I used to think it was that you served the 365 days. No, it is because that is in the category of offense that could theoretically carry a 365-day penalty that will make you just as precarious as someone who's committed a felony. So it's a very, very harsh reality.
Thank you so much. So we're gonna do a marathon run in 8 minutes and open it up for questions. But I think there was a question in the middle there when we are about to start. Yeah.
I just wondered if you could define the way you're using the word immigrant. When you talk about the number of immigrants in Rhode Island, are you talking about people who do not have permanent legal status?
No. So minus U.S. citizen, everyone else. So legal permanent residents, asylees, refugees, people on temporary protective status, undocumented, they are all immigrants.
So anyone who is not actually a U.S. citizen?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah. Question.
What concerns me is I think our discourse is ahistorical and the statistics are skewed. When I was growing up in Chicago in the 50s, if you were African, segregation laws didn't apply. You could go to a restaurant or you could go to a hotel that would bar my family from partaking. But if you're from Africa, you could. In the 60s, for universities to get federal funds, you had to have X number of people of color, which was then, blacks or Negroes. So often schools would doctor the numbers in order to get those federal funds. But now it's shifted. Dr. Gates got in trouble at Harvard a few years ago when Harvard announced that they had a record number of African American male students that were admitted. Almost all the students were from Africa. They weren't from the south side of Chicago. So here in Rhode Island, what concerns me is this, and then I'll get to the question. We don't know how many immigrants are here, at least if it's talking about this diaspora, because they're automatically lumped or categorized as black. And I've gone to the State House, I've gone to the Department of Education. It'd be real easy. Why can't we say, whoever this person is, are they indigent, African, or they're a recent arrival, whatever? If you don't have those numbers, what we're talking about is skewed. Not to say that all populations can't be serviced. And I don't have any issue with anyone who's here. They should have the opportunity to partake in everything that's wonderful here. But for people on the outside, it's much more complicated. Especially when you have kids here in South Providence, they'll never have an opportunity to they won't go to college. But for the ones that go to Brown, or to Rick, or URI, they're recent arrivals.
Yeah, absolutely. Before the panel comes in quickly, I think that's a very valid point. It's important to name populations of people rightly. It's not segregation, I agree. It's because if you don't know who is African, who is African American, you may not be able to serve them well. I think that's the case with the Asians. It used to be all aggregated once. So now I think there's probably a law in Rhode Island that changes it changes the aggregation to Southeast Asian versus Asian. So I think it's the same thing.
But for us that's not formally educated, they don't understand that.
Yeah,
70% of the people in Rhode Island don't go to college.
No, you are right. It's the same thing with the Asian, and they succeeded. So it should be. I think.
No, I was just gonna say about the numbers. So immigrant, if you're a legal permanent resident, you're legal. If you're born in the U.S. as a black person, you're not gonna be categorized as an immigrant. So because there's so many processes, that is actually data from immigration that will tell you who immigrants are.
But
so
you had your baby at Women in Campus Hospital, nurses there. How do they categorize your son? I don't want to get into that. That's your personal business.
Yeah.
But I've seen the women in the hospital. They're black.
Yeah, so
They
the
don't say
baby
library.
is, yeah,
They
so
don't
the
say you're from
baby,
Gambia.
if you're born in the US, you're not an immigrant.
Right, but
Yeah.
still, even the mother and the father, because they will put down their so-called race. We all know race doesn't exist.
Right,
It's a social construct.
yeah.
Absolutely.
But we have to deal with that, though. But again, other than the child, for mother and father, whatever, that's
No, I agree, yeah, but the number I gave was not from the hospital, it's from immigration.
So we have question from here.
So I think my question is around data security, and the fact that when we're talking about like the chilling effects and access to public benefits, outside of like just like HR1, there is like the fact that the federal government is using state data sources to collect information to facilitate the deportation process. So like from both of your, and all three of your perspectives, like what do you think states can do? Answer it however you want, honestly. But like I just want to bring that topic up.
So I want to say and speak slowly into the record that I'm shouting out Steve Brown from the ACLU of Rhode Island right now. Because over the last 10, 15 years, Steve and I have worked together on a lot of different legislation that would collect data that was immigrant sensitive. And Steve was always like, you shouldn't do that, that's very dangerous. And I and many other colleagues were like, no, we really want to make sure that people can get access to Medicaid. We really want people to be able to drive safely with their driver privilege card. Like the driver privilege card, I'm still like very salty about this because Steve was like, that data is going to be vulnerable to the federal government coming in and sucking it up. And I was like, no. At the time I worked for state government, we have very strict laws about these things. It's all going to be copacetic. And guess what? I was wrong. I want to say it on the record, out loud, because actually we are still having these fights, and every single time that the federal government tries to get this data, states are suing, attorney generals are suing, they are pushing back. Data about trans kids' health, going after through HIPAA. I used to be like, oh no, HIPAA is the gorilla of data privacy, but they're pushing through. This is a radical agenda to push through these data protections. And I have revised my thinking in terms of where I will be in 10 years about other initiatives and being much more attentive to layer upon layer of making it explicit that the federal government cannot access benefit program data collected by states, but it is a battleground. And I will say, it is a battleground. So again, having the courage to stand up and fight, all of these state AGs who are out there saying, hell no, you have to come through us to get to that data, that's the right thing to be doing.
Yeah. I'm conflicted about not collecting it or collecting it because it's being used against people. But to the point is, for years, we haven't had accurate data on a lot of things, right? And as people were moving towards equity and making sure certain communities weren't being left behind, it was the data, in addition to people's story, that made us understand, what the issue was. Like the 1 in 5 business owners, that's sort of important data. So I'm conflicted because if we don't have the data, especially for those of us who work in policy, part of the story, because we can testify, but sometimes it's like pairing the numbers with the story is what gets people attention. So I'm really struggling with, is there a creative way? We've been thinking about creative way. Is there a way that a community can start to collect and own their own data in ways that we don't have to give, so you have it just in case you need it, but it's sort of protected from people who could abuse it? So I think we need to figure out the data question, but I don't want us to not collect any data because it tells the story when people are like, you're just making it up. People in South Providence are not really struggling. Or, so that's why we spend years telling the stories and actually have proof that the disparities we've been talking about are actually real. And so I'm nervous about losing all of that. And that is purposeful. So part of the chilling effect is to make us scared to collect the data too. So it's almost like, should we fight back against that too? But we need to find a smart way to do it. But it almost like gave me, I'm like, they're trying to scare us into not collecting data. And because of that, the fighter Amy is like, no, we need to figure out how to collect the data, but do it safely.
So community ownership of data is a huge point and actually very powerful. The FBI does not collect statistics on police killings, but a group of journalists got together and created a very powerful database, very complete, very accurate, of police killings in the United States. So community ownership of data, now that takes work, but that's the kind of thing where a group of committed citizens can come together. A group of journalists did that, and with the internet, it's easier to publish data in ways that are more widely accessible and to really push that out into the public, but have the sources of the data not be able to be accessed by the government.
Well, on that note, unfortunately,
One more
oh, we can take one more question. Good. All right. Last but not the least.
So, I know that, like the thing is anything that, any bill or anything that's related to immigration, it draws a lot of attention from opponents as well as proponents. But suppose that the 364-day bail, suppose they went a different way and they just changed the penalty for misdemeanors to 6 months.
Well, not to get too nerdy, but there is actually a subcategory of misdemeanors that is 6 months, and then there's this category that is up to 365 days. So very creative. I like the way you think.
Maybe 11 months.
You could make it 363 days.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many permutations to solve the problem. This year, there has not been a very vocal opposition to that bill, I will say. There may be a silent opposition to that bill, but it has not been vocal.
So it's actually not necessarily tied to immigration. I mean, that is why people were motivated to do it. It just says that there will be no misdemeanors in Rhode Island that can be given a penalty of more than 364 days?
No, you have to read the immigration law and the definition of misdemeanor. The state defines misdemeanor and what the penalty for a misdemeanor is. Federal law doesn't say you can be deported if you commit a misdemeanor. It says you can be deported if you commit a crime that can be punished by a penalty of a year or $1,000 or more. So take my word for it. I've been working on this bill for like 12 years. 364 is the right number.
I testified in favor of that bill at the Senate last year, and I'm surprised it's still not.
It is.
Still hanging there.
There's an opportunity to go and, talk about it.
Yeah.
So how long have they been trying to pass that?
Oh no, like a decade.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Gay marriage took 12 years.
Yeah.
And now because the consequences are so dire, maybe it's the year people will pay attention.
Didn't it used to be that you had to have committed a felony to be deported?
Well, now you're going further back in terms of changes to immigration law, but this one, we can solve this problem simply by our state defining that penalty differently by 24 hours on the clock. And what is the counter argument to that? Like, oh, now we're really soft on misdemeanor crime because you're gonna get a day off. That's not an argument based in policy.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Weayonnoh and Jennifer Wood.
I'm going to introduce Mary Frances Cooper from the League of Women Voters.
Yeah.
Just for a few closing remarks, and thank Dr. Ba. Probably you can step over a bit on the other side of it.
Oh.
I don't want to.
Oh, the little dance with the mic. Weayonnoh and Jennifer for your insight and your time tonight. And Mary Frances, I'm gonna.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Sure.
Good. I just wanted to say that, I kind of feel that I'm a person that has been following this issue closely. It is important to me on many levels, and I learned things tonight that I didn't know. And so what I am taking away from this is that there is an awful lot I don't know. And I think we all have to figure out how we plug ourselves in and make sure that, these incredibly brilliant and committed people who are in our community and are doing this good work, and they need our support. And that's really important. I love you say just what do they say? You can't do everything, but you can do something. And we all can do something. And I really want to thank you all tonight. I'm really moved. And I'm going to go home and have a lot to think about, and I hope everybody here does as well. So thank you.
And the final piece of housekeeping is that next week, our topic is organizing for mutual aid. If you are not signed up for it, please stop by the check-in table and we'll just jot your name down and we'll register you for next week. And I'm sure our speakers would be happy to answer your questions, and I know that we'll want to get a group shot before the next. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.